Hey friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to press the bell icon like thumbs up, share up right arrow, and subscribe red heart.
What happens? A back ability meets reality, television, and a prince forgets that respect goes both ways. In aloof 26 seconds, one animadversion would about face a morning account into the best shocking TV accident of the year, catastrophe with a royal escort beeline out the studio doors. Acceptable Morning Britain's iconic red sofa had apparent its allotment of heated debates, but annihilation could prepare viewers for what was about to unfold. Susanna Reid, the show's admired host, known for her articulate analytic and unflappable professionalism, sat poised and ready. Beyond from her, Prince Harry settled into a sea with an air that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. The account started artlessly enough. Susanna accustomed him with her trademark warmth, thanking him for abutting the show, but from the absolute aboriginal question, something acquainted off. There was a striction in the air, blubbery abundant to cut. "Your Royal Highness, acknowledge you so abundant for being here this morning," Susanna began. Her smile 18 carat and professional. "I want to alpha by allurement about your recent comments apropos the British press. You've been actually articulate about your feelings. Can you advise our viewers understand your perspective?" Harry shifted in his seat, his jaw already tight. "Well, Susanna, I anticipate it's quite obvious, isn't it? The columnist in this country has been absolutely relentless. They've fabricated my activity and my family's activity actually miserable." "I understand that charge be difficult," Susanna responded, her accent abstinent and empathetic, "but abounding of our viewers might say that media absorption comes with the area of actuality royal. How would you acknowledge to that?" And there it was. The aboriginal beam of article darker crossed Harry's face. "How would I respond?" he repeated, his articulation rising slightly. "I'd say that's an incredibly naive view. Aloof because addition is born into our assertive ancestors doesn't beggarly they deserve to be bolter like animals." Susanna remained calm, nodding thoughtfully. "That's a fair point, and I think abounding bodies would ache with the advance you've experienced. But let me ask you this. Aback you've chosen to do interviews, address books, and produce documentaries about your private life, doesn't that allure some akin of public scrutiny?" Harry's eyes narrowed. "That's actually different. I'm telling my own adventure on my own term. That's called demography back control, something you and the media wouldn't understand." The animadversion landed with an uncomfortable thud. Susanna's smile remained, but viewers could see the slight stiffening of her shoulders. "I anticipate many journalists, myself included, assignment very hard to acquaint belief adequately and accurately. We're not all the same, Your Royal Highness, aren't you, though?" Harry attempt back, aptitude forward. "You all assignment for the aforementioned machine. You all benefit from the aforementioned arrangement that's designed to breach bodies bottomward for profit." Susanna took a breath, advancement her composure beautifully. "I account your feelings about the press. I actually do, but I acquire to advance a claim here. Good Morning Britain has consistently approved to give bodies a fair belvedere to share their views, including you this morning. We've arrived you actuality accurately so you can acquaint your ancillary of things without interruption." "After interruption?" Harry laughed, but there was no amusement in it. "You've disconnected me 3 times already, Susanna. Maybe you're not as fair as you anticipate you are." The accusation afraid in the air. Anyone watching could see that Susanna had done nothing but ask thoughtful, balanced questions. She hadn't interrupted. She'd simply asked follow-ups, which is what any acceptable announcer does. "I apologize if you feel I've interrupted," Susanna said graciously, admitting she had annihilation to apologize for. "That actually wasn't my intention." Amuse abide with your thought. But Harry wasn't absorbed in continuing his antecedent point. He'd found a new target. "You apperceive what the problem is with shows like this. You invite bodies on, you pretend to be sympathetic, and again you twist everything they say to fit your narrative. It's manipulative." Susanna's professionalism was actuality tested, but she captivated firm. "I can assure you that's not what's accident here. We appetite to hear from you. Genuinely, our viewers deserve to apprehend altered perspectives, including yours." "Your viewers?" Harry scoffed. Your admirers are fed whatever you appetite them to believe. They sit at home, bubbler their tea, and they lap up every chat you say like it's gospel. It's actually absolutely sad. There was an audible blow from Addition off camera. Susanna's co-host confused uncomfortably in his bench beside her, but Susanna herself remained the account of grace under fire. I anticipate our admirers are far more able than you're giving them credit for, she said, her articulation still steady, but with a new angle of steel. They're able of basic their own opinions, which is why we present them with a ambit of choir and viewpoints. Oh, please. Harry absolved her with a wave of his hand. Don't patronize me, Susanna. I've been ambidextrous with your type my complete life. Journalists who think they're so important, so noble, when actually you're aloof gossips with fancy titles. The insult was complete and personal. Susanna had spent decades building her acceptability as a serious journalist, Addition who asked tough questions but consistently advised her guests with respect. And now she was being called a account on a live television by someone who had agreed to be interviewed. I'm apologetic you feel that way, Susanna replied. And her professionalism in that moment was remarkable. But I acquire to say I acquisition it quite awless that you'd appear on our show, acquire our invitation, and then insult not aloof me but my colleagues in our audience. Disrespectful. Harry's articulation went up an octave. You want to allocution about disrespect? How about the boldness I've faced my entire life? How about accepting photographers chase my mother until she died? How about accepting every relationship, every private moment, every aberration plastered across newspapers for the Apple to judge? That's disrespect, Susanna. And that is actually terrible. I'm not diminishing that affliction at all. Susanna said, her affinity 18 carat admitting the attacks, but what happened to your mother was a tragedy, and best bodies in this country, including journalists, were abashed by it. We abstruse from that. Standards changed, but you're painting all of us with the aforementioned brush, and that's not fair either. Harry stood up suddenly, amazing everyone. Fair? You appetite to allocution about fair? Nothing about my activity has been fair, and now I have to sit actuality and be lectured by someone who makes a active asking intrusive questions. Susanna remained seated, attractive up. At him calmly. I'm not lecturing you, your aristocratic highness. I'm artlessly aggravating to acquire a conversation. If you'd like to sit back down, we can abide talking. I don't want to abide talking, Harry snapped. This was acutely a mistake. I should have accepted bigger than to appear on a show like this. A appearance like what exactly? Susanna asked. And there was a adumbration of challenge in her voice. Now, she'd been patient. She'd been understanding. But there's alone so abundant boldness one person can take. A appearance that pretends to care about complete issues, but actually just wants to accomplishment people's affliction for ratings, Harry said, his articulation dripping with contempt. A appearance that's hosted by someone who thinks she's bigger than everyone else. That was the line. That was the moment area Harry went from being a afflicted bedfellow to being completely out of order. Susanna had never acted superior. She'd never been anything but courteous, and everyone watching knew it. I acquire never thought I was bigger than anyone, Susanna said, her articulation firm. Now, I appear to work every day to do my job, to acquaint our viewers, to ask questions that need asking. I'm appreciative of what I do, and I will not sit actuality and be angered in this way. Then maybe you shouldn't have arrived me, Harry attempted back. You're actually right, Susanna said, standing up herself. Now, conceivably we shouldn't acquire because I anticipation you came actuality in acceptable faith, absent to have an honest discussion. Instead, you've been hostile, dismissive, and frankly quite abrupt from the moment you sat down. Harry's face ablaze red. How cartel you speak to me like that? And there it was. The arms laid bald for everyone to see. I'm speaking to you the way I'd speak to anyone who came on this show and behaved the way you're behaving, Susanna replied, not abatement bottomward an inch. Your appellation doesn't accord you the right to be aweless to me or anyone abroad here. My title, Harry laughed bitterly, is the alone acumen you wanted me on this appearance in the first place. Let's not pretend this was about having a elusive conversation. You wanted ratings. You capital to say you'd interviewed a prince. Well, congratulations. You got your interview. What I wanted, Susanna said, her patience assuredly acid thin, was to give you a belvedere to allotment your views in a admiring environment. But you've made that impossible. Harry stepped closer to the desk, his anatomy language aggressive now. You apperceive what your problem is, Susanna. You can't handle the truth. None of you can. You're so used to bodies' accidents and scraping, playing your little games, following your rules. Well, I'm done with that. I'm done assuming that bodies like you matter. The aggregation abaft the cameras had gone actually silent. This was no longer an interview. This was a meltdown happening in complete time. Susanna captivated her ground. Impressive because a prince was about looming over her desk. People like me, you beggarly working journalists who've becoming their positions through years of adamantine work. People who didn't acquire their futures handed to them by birth. It was a sharp response, but Harry had becoming it with his connected condescension. How dare you, Harry hissed. You acquire no idea what my activity has been like. You acquire no idea what it's like to be me. You're right. I don't, Susanna acknowledged. Just like you acquire no abstraction what it's like to be me or to be any of the millions of bodies watching this show who assignment adamantine every day and don't have the privileges you've had. We all have our struggles, your aristocratic highness. Yours are not the alone ones that matter. Harry acicular a feel at her, his hands shaking with rage. You're aloof like all the rest. You're absathian and jealous, and you adumbrate abaft your board assuming to be important. That's enough, Susanna said, her articulation acid through his rant. I acquire been accommodating with you. I have been admiring with you. I have tried to accord you every befalling to have a elusive conversation, but you have apparent annihilation but antipathy for me, for this show, and for our viewers. So, I'm activity to ask you politely. Please leave. Harry's eyes went wide. Excuse me. You heard me, Susanna said, standing taller. This account is over. I'm asking you to leave. You can't bang me out, Harry sputtered, atheism written all over his face. Do you apperceive who I am? Yes, I do, Susanna replied calmly. And right now you're a bedfellow on my appearance who has behaved inappropriately. So I'm asking you as the host of this program to leave the studio. This is outrageous, Harry said, attractive around as if assured addition to appear to his defense. You can't amusement me like this. I'm alleviative you actually how you've treated me, Susanna countered. With the respect you've shown, which is to say very little. Now please, let's end this with whatever address we acquire left. Harry stood there for a continued moment, clearly not acclimated to actuality told what to do. The arms broadcast off him in waves. He'd appear onto the show expecting to be handled with kid gloves, to say whatever he capital after pushback. And aback he encountered a host who actually had a spine, he'd completely fallen apart. Fine, Harry finally spat. I don't appetite to be actuality anyway. This show's below me. Then we're in agreement, Susanna said, her composure never cracking. Goodbye, Your Royal Highness. Harry affronted on his heel and stormed off the set, but not before throwing one final animadversion over his shoulder. You'll affliction this, Susanna. I promise you that. It was meant to sound threatening, but it came beyond as petulant, like a adolescent who hadn't gotten their way and was lashing out. Susanna watched him go, again affronted aback to the camera. She took a breath, smoothed her jacket, and somehow managed to smile. Well, she said to the admirers at home, that didn't actually go as planned. We'll take a quick breach and be appropriate back. The professionalism in that moment was extraordinary. She'd aloof been insulted, attacked, and threatened on live television, and she handled it with complete grace. As the appearance cut to commercial, the added host affronted to Susanna. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Susanna nodded, admitting her hands were afraid slightly. I'm fine, but that was actually out of order. He was abominable to you. The co-host agreed. You handled it brilliantly, though. You gave him every chance. And that was the truth of it. Susanna had been nothing but able from alpha to finish. She'd asked fair questions. She'd listened to his responses. She'd shown empathy for his struggles. And in return, he'd been hostile, insulting, and ultimately actually disrespectful. The moment the cameras had gone off, producers had rushed to analysis on Susanna. "We're so sorry," one of them said. "We had no abstraction he'd be like that." "It's not your fault," Susanna assured them. "Some interviews aloof don't go well. This one actually didn't go well." That was an understatement. Amusing media had exploded oral seconds. People couldn't acquire what they just witnessed. A affiliate of the aristocratic family having a complete breakdown on morning television, calumniating a admired host, and again affronted off set like a teenager. But Susanna didn't affliction about any of that in the moment. She was focused on accepting through the blow of the show, on advancement, the professionalism that she'd congenital her entire career on. Aback the appearance came back from commercial, Susanna addressed what had happened briefly but didn't dwell on it. "As you all saw, our interview with Prince Harry concluded rather abruptly. We consistently achievement for constructive conversations actuality on Good Morning Britain, but sometimes things don't go as planned. We account that emotions can run high, abnormally when discussing claimed topics, but we also have to advance assertive standards of respect in our studio." It was perfectly said. She accustomed what happened without actuality petty, after attacking Harry further, after actuality anything less than the able she'd always been. The blow of the appearance went smoothly with Susanna effective seamlessly from topic to affair as if annihilation had happened. But anybody who'd watched those 15 accounts knew they'd witnessed something extraordinary. Not aloof a celebrity meltdown, but a masterclass in how to handle addition who's being unreasonable, because that's what it came bottomward to. Harry had been unreasonable from the start. He'd come onto the appearance with an agenda, with a chip on his shoulder, accessible to be offended by annihilation and everything. He'd apparent enemies area there were none. He'd taken reasonable questions as personal attacks. And aback challenged, even gently, he'd actually lost control. Susanna, on the added hand, had been the complete account of how a host should behave. She'd been fair. She'd been respectful. She'd been empathetic right up until the point area Harry had made it absurd to continue. And even then, she'd handled his abatement from the studio with class. The adverse couldn't have been starker. Actuality was a prince, someone built-in into unimaginable privilege, acting like a baby child who couldn't handle a simple interview. And actuality was a live journalist, someone who'd becoming every bit of her success, assuming the affectionate of adroitness under pressure that best bodies could only dream of. Harry's departing blackmail echoed in abounding people's minds afterward. "You'll regret this." But the alone actuality who had anything to affliction was Harry himself. He'd appear on to one of Britain's most watched morning shows and apparent the country actually the affectionate of actuality he'd become. Advantaged, angry, clumsy to take any criticism, and quick to baste out at anyone who didn't amusement him like he was special. Susanna had annihilation to regret. She'd done her job, and she'd done it well. She'd asked the questions that needed asking. She'd maintained her composure aback faced with hostility, and she'd stood up for herself and her profession aback addition approved to diminish both. The account was supposed to be Harry's adventitious to share his angle to advise people understand his point of view. Instead, it became an absolute archetype of everything bodies had appeared to dislike about him. The connected arena of the victim card. The abnegation to booty any responsibility. The lashing out at anyone who dared to catechism him. The inability to see that maybe, aloof maybe, other people's perspectives and experiences mattered too. What fabricated it even added arresting was Susanna's reaction throughout. She never absent her cool. She never angled to his level. She remained able alike aback he was actually unprofessional. She showed affinity alike aback he showed none. She advised him with respect, alike when he advised her with contempt. That contrast told admirers aggregate they needed to apperceive about who the real problem was in that studio. Harry had walked in cerebration his appellation and his troubles gave him authorization to behave however he wanted. He absolved out having proven actually the opposite. That titles mean annihilation if you don't acquire basic respect for others. That having difficulties in your activity doesn't excuse treating bodies poorly. That actuality royal doesn't accomplish you right. Susanna had walked inaccessible to do her job. She walked out accepting done actually that. With her acceptability not aloof intact, but enhanced, she'd apparent that you can be tough and fair at the aforementioned time. That you can appearance affinity after actuality a pushover. That you can maintain standards after actuality inflexible. The whole adventure lasted beneath than 15 minutes from alpha to finish. But in those 15 minutes, two absolute different people showed the apple actually who they were. One was a Abel who knew how to handle difficult situations with grace. The added was Addition who, despite all his advantages, couldn't handle a simple account without falling apart. And that's actually what made the accomplished affair so shocking. It wasn't aloof that Harry had a bad interview. Celebrities acquire bad interviews all the time. It was the sheer akin of abhorrence he displayed. The claimed attributes of his attacks, the complete disability to a point in a normal conversation after seeing everything as a slight to join him. Susanna had dealt with difficult guests before. She'd handled politicians who approved to dodge questions, celebrities who were defensive, activists who were passionate to the point of confrontation, but she'd rarely, if ever, dealt with Addition who was so bent to be offended, so ready to baste out, so clumsy to see reason. The sad allotment was that Harry probably did acquire accurate credibility to make about media advance and the pressures of aristocratic life, but he never got to make them. Not really, because he was too busy actuality affronted and arresting to have an absolute conversation. If he'd appear in with an accessible mind, if he'd affianced with Susanna's questions thoughtfully, if he'd apparent alike a atom of the respect she showed him, it could have been a able interview. He could have helped bodies acquire his perspective. He could acquire built sympathy for his position. Instead, he destroyed any accord bodies' ability have had by assuming them Addition who'd lost all perspective. Addition who thought that actuality built-in into ability meant never having to acknowledgement reasonable questions. Someone who believed his affliction was the only affliction that mattered. Addition who would advance a able journalist for accomplishing her job because he couldn't handle a like affable advance back. The most telling moment was a back he'd said, "Do you apperceive who I am?" That question revealed aggregate in his mind. His identity, his appellation should have protected him from any analysis or criticism. The actuality that Susanna treated him like any added guest, captivation him to the aforementioned standards of respectful discourse that anybody abroad was held to, was allegedly too abundant for him to bear. But that's actually what made Susanna's administration of the bearings so admirable. She didn't accord him special treatment. She didn't let his title intimidate her. She didn't angle her standards aloof because she was dealing with royalty. She advised him fairly, which meant alleviative him like everyone else. And aback he couldn't handle that, when he became calumniating and disrespectful, she did what any self-respecting host would do. She ended the interview. She asked him to leave. She banned to accommodate a belvedere for someone who was application that belvedere to attack her and insult her viewers. It was a adventurous affair to do. Abounding hosts might acquire approved to bland things over, to bowl him, to let the account limp to its accustomed conclusion, but Susanna recognized that continuing would have been wrong. It would acquire beatific the message that it's accept to amusement people that way as continued as you're acclaimed or royal. It would acquire adored bad behavior. By continuing up for herself and her show, she beatific a abundant better message. That account is a two-way street. That titles don't excuse rudeness. That able standards matter. Regardless of who your bedfellow is, in the end, what was meant to be Harry's platform became Susanna's finest moment. She'd been activated in the best accessible way possible, and she'd anesthetized with flying colors. She'd apparent backbone without being aggressive. She'd shown professionalism after actuality cold. She'd apparent that you can angle up for yourself while still advancement your dignity. Harry, meanwhile, had shown exactly the opposite. He'd been accustomed a platform and acclimated it to attack. He'd been advised with account and returned it with contempt. He'd been offered a chance to allotment his adventure and instead threw a anger that appear far more about his appearance than any interview answers any time could. 26 seconds. That's how continued it took from Harry's first truly claimed insult to the moment Susanna asked him to leave. 26 seconds that crystallized aggregate that was wrong with his access and everything that was appropriate with hers. Those 26 seconds would be replayed over and over, analyzed, and discussed, captivated up as an example of how to handle addition who's being unreasonable, and how not to behave aback you're a bedfellow on someone else's show. For Susanna, they were 26 seconds that accepted she was every bit the able bodies consistently believed her to be. For Harry, there were 26 seconds that appear he'd become exactly the affectionate of entitled, autofouch figure he consistently claimed to be fighting against. The irony was about too perfect. In aggravating to criticize the media and avert himself, Harry had provided the media with the perfect story. And in aggravating to acrylic himself as a victim, he'd apparent himself to be something abroad entirely. Addition who expected aberration he hadn't earned. Someone who accepted account he wouldn't give. Addition who capital understanding he banned to appearance others. Addition who thought his problems were so abundant bigger than anybody else's that common courtesy didn't administer to him. Susanna didn't acquire to say any of that. She didn't acquire to point out the irony or make him attending bad. Harry did that all by himself, artlessly by assuming who he really was aback faced with questions he didn't like, and a host who wouldn't be bullied. The red sofa had apparent many memorable moments over the years. Arguments amid political opponents, emotional revelations from celebrities, heated debates about amusing issues, but nothing actually like this. Annihilation that so clearly showed the aberration between someone with complete chic and addition who just anticipation their chic gave them the right to be classless.
Thank you for watching my video.